Picture a courtroom that was so quiet that you could practically hear a pin drop. And then suddenly, in one instant, the silence was broken with gasps, whispers, and the testimony of a family dynasty collapsing before your very eyes. That is precisely what happened when the jury delivered the verdict against Kody Brown. Yes, the very same Kody Brown, who for years presented his multifaceted family life on Sister Wives. What started as a family lawyer's fight turned suddenly into one of the public scandals reality shows has ever experienced. And the carnage. It wasn't merely a family soap opera anymore. It became a cultural earthquake, rattling viewers, critics, and even occasional viewers who couldn't think what they were seeing. This is not a verdict. This is the dismantling of an empire. The air in that courtroom was thick with tension. Cody, who had been used to his larger-than-life swagger, sat rigid, his eyes flicking toward the jury box. His wives, past and present, were seated throughout the room, each face wearing its own tale of heartache, bitterness, or cold vindication. As the foreman of the jury rose and gave the verdict, its effect was instant. Cody's face blanched, his jaw clenching as if he could physically restrain the wave of repercussions about to engulf him. Robyn let out a loud gasp, her hand slamming against her mouth. Christine, who had sat discreetly in the back, began to weep, tears not only of shock, but of long-held anguish finally pouring out. The verdict wasn't only legal, it was symbolic. It declared, in a voice that couldn't be ignored, that the man who had dictated every story, every discussion, and every piece of the family puzzle for years was no longer at the helm whatsoever. If the verdict shocked the public, the family's breakdown made it front-page news. Cameras recorded every moment, Robyn screaming across the courtroom, demanding answers that no one could give. Janelle struggling hard to stay calm, although her shaking hands revealed otherwise. Meri sat still, her expression one of stone, but how she tightly gripped her fists betrayed her. Christine, usually the most tearful of the wives, couldn't keep it inside any longer. She openly wept, burying her head in her daughter's shoulder. The world was watching, and for the first time, there was no disguising behind professionally edited reality TV shows. This was unbridled, unscripted meltdown, every feeling out in the open. And the meltdown didn't stop in court. It trailed them out into the parking lot, where there were reporters massing like a swarm of bees to honey. Cody attempted to strut tall, attempted to manage the story, but he was shaken. "His is not fair," he growled, his voice breaking with rage. Cameras rolled as he stormed away, leaving his family in a whirlpool of dismay and embarrassment. In seconds, the news was on social media, and the internet went crazy. Hashtags such as #Kody Brown verdict, #family meltdown, and #sister wives drama trended globally. Twitter was abuzz with memes ridiculing Cody's stunned face. TikTokers recreated the courtroom drama in satirical skits. YouTube glowed with live reactions, analyses, and fiery debates. Other fans were delighted, stating justice had finally been served to the man they felt had abused his wives for many years. Others stood up for him, stating that the jury had been prejudiced, and that Cody was being unfairly singled out because of his unusual way of life. What was making it even more explosive was that reality TV personalities and former cast members entered the conversation. One of the celebrities posted, "This is more than any TLC finale. The drama is writing itself." At that time, Kody Brown wasn't only a guy in legal jeopardy. He was a trending topic, a meme, a cautionary tale, and a spectacle wrapped up in one. For years, Cody took pride in being the head of his household, the decision-maker, the guy who could manage 4 wives and over a dozen kids. But now, he appeared like a guy breaking beneath the pressure. When journalists cornered him for reactions, he unleashed his anger. His voice trembled as he hurled accusations at the media of making his life a circus. "You don't know the truth," he shouted, his finger pointing at the cameras. "This isn't justice. It's entertainment for you people." The moment was tragic and ironic. For years, Cody had welcomed cameras into his life, benefiting from the very spotlight he now loathed. But the distinction was apparent. On television, he edited himself. In real life, here there were no edits, only brutal exposure. The breaking point was when Kody walked out of an interview halfway through, leaving Robyn to stand before the cameras by herself. She shook, holding back tears, whispering, "This isn't fair," as photographers asked questions she was unable to answer. The so-called United Front had finally broken. If the courtroom was pandemonium, the family house was wreckage. The cameras recorded images no one believed they'd ever witness. Fights broke out in every corner. Christine accused Kody of ruining the family with his ego, pointing her finger at him. Janelle demanded accountability, her voice fierce and unrelenting. Meri, who had long remained quiet, stunned everyone by unleashing her own years of frustration. "You've humiliated us over and over again," she shouted, her words slicing through the room like a knife. And Robyn, she just lost it. Weeping hysterically, she begged everyone to quit fighting, but her demands only served to further inflame the ugliness. Children stood by, bewildered and traumatized, as the family they had always known disintegrated before their eyes. It wasn't merely a brawl, it was the collapse of a whole legacy, broadcast for the world to witness. The following morning, the Browns awoke not only to broken relationships, but to headlines splashed across all platforms imaginable. News networks recycled the meltdown video on repeat. Analysts picked apart each emotion, each tear, each outraged utterance. Kody, once the self-assured patriarch of a polygamous family, was now portrayed as an emblem of ruin. His family, once a novelty for their unconventional way of life, was now a sad cautionary tale of control, ego, and the price of living in the public eye. For viewers, it was addictive drama. For the Browns, it was heartbreak. The verdict wasn't merely about the laws. It was symbolic. It indicated to audiences that even a person who had amassed an empire through reality television couldn't get away with anything. It compelled viewers to question difficult things. Was Kody ever the leader he professed to be? Or was he just a guy who used cameras as a hiding place until the truth caught up to him? The ruling shattered the internet not due to its judicial significance, but due to its emotional impact. Not only were they responding to the verdict, but they were responding to years of tension, manipulation, and drama that had finally been forced to a head in the most public manner possible. By the end of it all, there was one image seared into everyone's mind. Kody, standing in front of the courthouse, his face pale, his shoulders sagging, as his family collapsed around him. No cameras, no scripts, no TLC editing, just a man witnessing his world fall apart before millions. It was the end of an era, the end of the Brown family fans had come to know, and the world, as ugly as it sounds, couldn't turn away. So here's the truth. The jury's verdict didn't shock just the Browns. It shocked the world. It turned a family already teetering on the edge into a global sensation. It broke the internet, it shattered the illusion, and it proved to us all that reality TV can get too real. And as fans still argue online, one thing is certain, this verdict wasn't just the end of a case. It was the end of Kody Brown's empire. The blowing up start, the verdict that rocked the room. The atmosphere within the courthouse was tense, nearly claustrophobic. All seats were taken, and all eyes in the room were on one individual, Kody Brown. This was not a typical court proceeding. This was an event, a spectacle, a moment individuals knew would be remembered for years to come. Reporters jotted down notes in notebooks. Photographers checked the lenses, and fans who had stood in line for hours hunched up in their seats, eager not to miss a fraction of a second. At the front, the jury stiffened, faces impassive. They had deliberated for days, balancing evidence and testimony that had pulled the Brown family's secrets out of the shadows. Murmurs spread through the crowd as the court officer demanded order, and then silence. The sort of silence that makes your heart beat with such a strength it feels like a drum in your ears. Kody Brown, typically so brash, sat with arms folded tightly over his chest. His jaw was clenched, his lips pursed into a line, but his body tension betrayed him. His leg jiggled nervously beneath the table, and his eyes darted from the jury to the judge to the crowd behind him. For a man who had spent years dictating his own story on television, it was a nightmare. Because here, in this courtroom, he did not have control. The wives were spread out in various rows, and their body language told it all. Robyn sat nearest to him, white-faced, her hand clapped hard over her mouth as if she was struggling not to scream. Christine huddled in the back, tears already welling in her eyes. Janelle stiffly sat with hands crossed in her lap, while Meri's face was unreadable, a mask of stone, though the rigidity of her shoulders betrayed the whirlwind brewing beneath. The judge's throat cleared. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?" The foreman stood, a paper folded in his hand. "We have, Your Honor." You heard the rustle of papers, the groan of wooden benches, the shudder of cameras focusing. Everyone waited with bated breath as the verdict was handed to the judge. He slowly unfolded it, meticulously, as if even he knew the gravity of this moment. The world stood still, time ground to a halt. And then the words. The decision echoed throughout the courtroom, and the effect was instantaneous. Gasps filled the air. Some shouted out, others simply shook their heads in horror. The silence that had held court in the room, mere moments ago, now broke into pandemonium. Cody paled. For the first time in years, possibly ever, he appeared weak. His mouth dropped open, as if he was about to object, but no sound emerged. His eyes roamed the courtroom for something, anything that could ground him. But there was nothing. Only cameras recording every fluctuation of emotion on his face, and half a dozen pairs of eyes witnessing him unravel in real time. Robyn's sob cut through the chaos, shattering into her hands. Christine, overcome with emotion, wept openly, unable to hold all that repressed pain inside for so long. Janelle attempted to be strong, but her hands shook as she went to grab her phone to text one of her children about the news. Meri didn't move, her mask never wavering, although her fists that were locked in place told a tale. The gavel of the judge came down for order, but it scarce penetrated the hum of whispers and gasps. Journalists scrambled to scribble notes, their gazes alternating between Cody's shocked face and the wives' dramatic reactions. Some fans could not help but lean in for a better look. And then the flash. Dozens of cameras fired all at once, snapping the shot that would soon top the newsstands of the globe. Cody sat back in his chair, slowly shaking his head, mouthing something as if he was cursing himself out. He appeared to be a man in a free fall, a man who had invested years in the creation of an image, and then sat there helplessly watching as it shattered in an instant. The jurors, in turn, sat motionless, their expressions a brick wall. They had given their verdict. Their duty was complete, but the repercussions were only just starting to unfold. Outside of the courtroom, the world was already abuzz. Tweets, texts, and live streams spread the word like wildfire. Fans who had followed the Browns for years were in shock, and those who had only moderately watched the show were suddenly emotionally invested. The verdict was not merely a legal ruling, it was a cultural phenomenon, a reckoning. Back in the room, Cody at last stood up, his chair scraping noisily against the floor. He stiffened his back, attempting to find the confidence he had once borne so easily. His shoulders slumped under the burden of the verdict. He glanced over at Robyn, who gripped his arm frantically, her face smeared with tears. He glared beyond her, his eyes brushing briefly against Christine's, who unwillingly avoided meeting his eyes. The bailiff stepped forward to lead the jury out, but there was still pandemonium in the room. The reporters shouted out questions, the spectators hurled furious whispers, and family members stood grouped together trying to comprehend what had just occurred. Cody lifted his hand, as if he might find his voice, but there were no words. He dropped it again, beaten. The man who had once proclaimed himself so loudly and proudly, the leader of a vast plural family, was now still, deprived of power, deprived of control, deprived of the story he had held onto for so long. The judge ordered again, his voice firm, but even he appeared to recognize the enormity of the moment. This wasn't another case. This was history, for the Browns, for reality television, and for every viewer who'd ever watched. As the courtroom finally began to empty, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. For Cody, this was the breaking point for his empire. For the wives, it was a confirmation of years of heartache and hardship. For the children, it was an agonizing validation that the cracks in their family weren't just in their feelings. They were in their structure, permanent and now public for the world to behold. And for the audience, it was appalling, tragic, and compulsive all at once. The type of moment that leaves you sitting back, rewinding the tape and exclaiming, "Did that just occur?" The cameras did not lie. The words of the jury had been uttered, and the Brown family, united once in a masterfully created image, was now shattered before millions. The verdict wasn't just the end of a trial, it was the beginning of a collapse. And the world was watching, the family cracks wide open. The decision had scarcely resonated through the courtroom when the Browns disintegrated. Years our imaginations ran wild, guessing what went down behind closed doors, watching edited episodes of Sister Wives that promised tension but never delivered the extent of the cracks. But in that instant, there was no edit, no script, no strategically placed soundtrack. There was merely mayhem, raw, untidy, explosive mayhem that yanked every hidden wound straight to the forefront. Christine was the first to collapse. Sitting in the back row, she had so desperately tried to hold it together, her hands clinging to a tissue, her lips clamped shut. But the reality of the jury's words was more than she could bear. The tears were swift, uncontrollable, and for a fleeting moment she resembled a drowning woman beneath the recollections of days gone by, recollections of being silenced, ignored, and shoved aside. Her sobs filled the courtroom, a sound so piercing that even the reporters momentarily paused in their note-taking. Janelle, seated a few rows ahead, immediately turned in her chair, her eyes darting to Christine. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness. Despite the rifts that had grown between them over the years, instinct kicked in. She reached out her hand, squeezing Christine's shoulder in silent solidarity, but the shake in Janelle's hand was a giveaway of her own terror. Her lips were pressed tight, her face was white, her whole body was tense, as if she was restraining herself with sheer willpower alone. Meri sat by herself, stiff in position, her arms crossed over her chest. She was a past master at covering up, at concealing pain beneath a carefully expressionless face. But if you watched closely, if you observed, you could see the minute jerks of her jaw, the way her nails bit into the meat of her palms. Meri wasn't serene, she seethed, and unlike Christine, her tears weren't weeping, they were hidden, bottled up, ready for a time when no one was looking. And then there was Robyn. Robyn had always been portrayed as Cody's favorite wife, the one who caught his eye, his heart, his loyalty over all the rest. For years she had been the family peacekeeper, attempting to smooth over fights between the other wives, while holding her ground beside Cody. But in that courtroom, her facade fell. She slumped forward, holding on to Cody's arm, her eyes open in terror, and then so loudly that even the bailiff was startled. She cried, "This is unfair. This is not happening." The courtroom descended into stunned silence. Even the judge stopped reading his notes. Furrowed brow. Journalists hustled to jot down her words, their pens scribbling furiously across paper. The members of the jury shifted awkwardly, their work accomplished but still in attendance. Robyn wasn't done yet. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she gestured to the jury box. "You don't know him. You don't know our family. You don't know what this will do to us." Her voice broke, the sound of it ringing out off the wood walls of the courtroom. Cody leaned forward, saying something incomprehensible on a breath, and she shook her head hard, sobs shaking her frame. Robyn, ever the calm one with her back always to him, was utterly discomfited. The judge pounded his gavel. Order in the court, but it was past order now. Christine's sobs grew louder. Janelle, torn between comforting her sister wife and keeping her own composure, looked exhausted, defeated. Meri's mask slipped for a brief second, her lips curling in what almost looked like disgust, as she watched Robyn's meltdown. The entire courtroom had turned into a theater of family dysfunction, and every seat in the audience was a front row ticket. Beyond the courtroom doors, the chaos was already underway. Journalists who'd been kept out tumbled against the walls, Cameras at the ready, microphones at the ready. They heard the shouts, the crying, the gavel banging for order. And when the doors opened at last, disgorging the Browns into the hallway, the mayhem only grew. Christine, her cheeks smeared with tears, elbowed past the cameras, daughter by her side. She tuned out the shouted questions, the red and raw face set in determination. No comment, she wailed, covering her face. Janelle trailed behind, her feet moving briskly. Her shoulders slumped as though she had the weight of the whole family on her shoulders. She mumbled something to a reporter, something about needing space, but her voice was lost in the sea of voices. Meri walked slower, slow chin high as if challenging anyone to come near her. She would not cry before strangers, would not allow anyone the pleasure of hearing her hurt. But her eyes betrayed her, keen, glassy, searing, with an anger that could find no release. And then Robyn, holding on to Cody's arm for dear life, as though releasing it would be losing everything. Her crying persisted, her voice cracking as she begged. This isn't who he is. You don't know the truth. Reporters closed in around her, microphones shoved forward, their cameras flashing so intensely that she winced with each snap. Cody meanwhile attempted to stride tall, his jaw clenched, his steps purposeful, but his face spoke the truth. His eyes shifted uneasily, his lips compressed into a thin, quivering line. He didn't yell, not yet, but tension in his body was palpable, like an erupting volcano. The hallway was turned into a battleground. The Browns were no longer a family but a spectacle. Each raw feeling, each word, each tear was shared with the world in minutes. Social media went crazy with footage of Robyn's yelling, Christine's crying, and Cody's shocked silence. Fans raged in the comments, some sticking up for Robyn, others accusing her of performing. But the reality could not be denied. The family was breaking wide open, in plain sight. Even the kids who had been mostly quiet during the trial weren't immune. A teenage girl huddled with Christine, her own eyes puffy from tears. A son lingered awkwardly beside Janelle, his fists bunched as if repressing his own frustration. It was no longer about Cody anymore. The verdict had spread to all areas of the family, infecting even the littlest hearts and causing wounds that would last a lifetime. Back in the courtroom, court officers shook their heads, grumbling that they had ever witnessed such a spectacle. One leaned over to another and whispered, "It's like seeing a TV drama played out live." And perhaps that's why it was so heartbreaking. For years the Browns had opened up their lives to cameras, scripting scenarios for viewers, carefully controlling what the world witnessed. But this was raw, untamed, and irreversible. The meltdown wasn't just a side effect of the verdict. It was the true verdict. A confirmation that the family, once touted as an unconventional but united front, was fractured beyond repair. Christine's sobs, Robyn's screams, Meri's stone silence, Janelle's trembling hands, these weren't just reactions. They were confessions. Confessions of a family that had been cracking for years, finally shattering under the weight of truth. And as the Browns poured out into the blinding lights of the media horde on the sidewalk beyond, one thing became painfully evident to all of us watching. This was not merely the failure of a marriage, or even a family, it was the failure of an empire. The family fractures were no longer concealed. They were out in the open, raw and on public display for all to see, and there would be no retracing steps. The internet on fire. The jury's verdict had hardly been uttered, the breakdown of the family still echoing through the courthouse, when the explosion truly got underway, outside the courtroom, on the internet. Before Cody and his wives were half-walked, half-shoved past the mob of reporters, and pushed into waiting cars, the internet was already on fire. Twitter feeds filled like a wildfire, hashtags rising up the trending list, before most of the Browns had even realized what was going on. #Kody Brown verdict. #family meltdown. #sister wives scandal. The words flashed onto millions of screens, spreading quicker than the family could draw their next breath. For devoted fans who had watched Sister Wives for years, it was the ultimate season finale for a series that had been running for over a decade. For observers, it was an unstoppable train crash. and for the Browns themselves it was global humiliation. In minutes, screenshots from within the courtroom were circulating on the web. Cody's shocked white face, his mouth open, his eyes wide with alarm, was forever memorialized in meme culture. One meme placed Cody's shocked face alongside the caption, "When you realize TLC can't edit this part out." Another featured his look alongside a popular audio clip. It was all going so well, until it wasn't. TikTok users responded by repeating Robyn's courtroom meltdown, in over-the-top dramatics and exaggerated tears. Others spliced in Christine's tears, cutting her into melodramatic soap opera montages. Dozens of TikToks racked up millions of views within an hour. Even Instagram was filled with reaction posts. Photos of the Browns in their first seasons, smiling and together, placed alongside the unfiltered photos of them now, broken and fractured. The captions pretty much wrote themselves, from sister wives to sister battles. But the internet wasn't laughing. It was torn. On the other hand, thousands of viewers were applauding the decision, saying it was long overdue. Finally, Cody gets what he deserves. A trending tweet exclaimed, attracting more than 80,000 likes. Another spectator posted, "Christine's tears speak volumes. She built this family for years while Cody destroyed it." Christine's meltdown in court fast became a cause célèbre. Her fans swarmed her Instagram with words of support and love. "We stand with you, Christine," became a small movement, as fans posted her old clips from the show, moments when she had suggested that she was not happy, using them as evidence that she had been correct all along. But on the other hand, Cody's supporters rallied as well. They said the jury's decision was unjust, that Cody was being unfairly singled out because of his non-traditional lifestyle. "This isn't about justice, it's about punishing polygamy," opined one blogger, which set off fiery debates throughout Reddit forums. Robyn's meltdown caused its own torrent of apologists. Some defended her as a wife seeing the man she loves being embarrassed. Others ridiculed her, labeling her as playing victim, and blaming her for attempting to drum up public sympathy. It wasn't long before celebrities and influencers got involved in the debate. Reality TV personalities who had previously shared their limelight with the Browns tweeted ambiguously. One of its former personalities wrote, "Watching this go down live. Let's just say, karma has a funny way of working." One of its reality stars at Netflix interjected, "This is bigger than anything we've ever filmed. You can't script this kind of chaos." Even the late-night talk show hosts joined in. One comedian posted on Twitter, "Breaking news, jury finds Kody Brown guilty of bad hair and worse decision-making." It was retweeted tens of thousands of times, igniting a spate of jokes about Cody's notorious hairstyles throughout the years. YouTubers rode the wave with reaction videos. Some channels went live immediately, hosting hundreds of thousands of viewers as they analyzed the verdict minute by minute. Others posted sensational commentary, including slow-motion shots of Robyn screaming and Christine's weeping. In a matter of hours, dozens of Kody Brown verdict explained videos overflowed YouTube's trending page. In the meantime, the comment sections on each platform turned into battlegrounds. Fans battled fiercely, line by line, in support of their preferred sides. On one viral Facebook post featuring Christine crying, one supporter wrote, "She deserved better for years. This verdict is justice." But before long, responses accumulated, with others contending, "Stop glorifying Christine. This isn't justice, it's cruelty." Reddit discussions exploded, some reaching thousands of posts in a matter of hours. Sister wives subreddits turned into war zones, with moderators struggling to cope with the deluge of new content. Some users posted personal accounts of growing up in polygamous families and drawing comparisons to the Browns. Others debated whether the ruling would impact the future of reality television itself. It wasn't only a family issue anymore, it was a cultural controversy. News sources grabbed it nearly immediately. Large networks featured reports with provocative titles. Kody Brown's surprising ruling, family explodes live in court. Global sources from the UK to Australia featured the Browns' faces on their websites. Footage of the courthouse was broadcast in the evening news. Anchors nodded in stunned disapproval, labeling it one of the biggest reality TV scandals in recent history. Commentators were debating whether fame had brought about the Browns' downfall, or if it had merely provided the Globe with a front row seat to an inevitable collapse. Even people who had never watched a single episode of Sister Wives suddenly knew the name Kody Brown. He had become a trending topic not just in the US but worldwide. For Cody, the humiliation deepened by the hour. His face, frozen in that stunned, almost childlike expression, became the internet's favorite new meme template. One tweet showed him staring blankly, captioned, "When Netflix asks if you're still watching." Another used his pale face to joke, "When you remember you didn't remove the chicken from the freezer." Even brands were not left behind. A fast food chain posted Cody's shocked face with the caption, "When the ice cream machine is out of order again." It went viral, earning hundreds of thousands of likes and offering the chain free advertising. Cody, the once proud patriarch, was now a punchline. His empire torn apart, his power parodied, his name joked about on every corner of the internet. But behind the jokes and memes, something more was going on. Fans weren't laughing, they were mourning. Mourning the delusion they had invested in for years. Sister Wives had been sold as a tale of non-traditional love, of family intact despite adversity. Years people had watched not only for the drama, but for the possibility of a family so vastly different coming together. Now that vision was destroyed. The verdict and public breakdown verified what people had suspected all along. The family was not intact. It was fractured. And the fans were disappointed. They had spent years on this tale, on these individuals, on believing in this dream that the Browns had peddled. And now, it all rested in tatters, laid bare. Maybe most astounding was how soon the verdict itself turned into entertainment. Footage of the judge pronouncing the jury's verdict was put to dramatic music on TikTok. Some fans cut the footage into reaction GIFs. Others used laugh tracks and sound effects, playing up the moment as if it were a sitcom. For millions it wasn't tragedy. It was content. And the Browns, much to their chagrin, had become the leads in a new, unscripted drama. The downfall of Kody Brown. By day's end, one question hung in the air on every platform: what's next? Would TLC cut Sister Wives? Would Christine, Janelle, or maybe even Meri finally speak their unvarnished truth in interviews? Would Cody and Robyn fade from view, or dig in, leveraging the drama to their benefit? No one knew. But one thing was certain: the internet wasn't dropping this anytime soon. For Kody Brown, the decision wasn't merely legal. It was a public execution of his reputation. For the wives, it was vindication and humiliation. For the children, it was agony they never saw coming. And for the world, it was addictive. The internet was aflame, and the Browns were the gasoline. Cody's breaking point. The doors of the courthouse closed behind them. But Kody Brown was not going anywhere. The shouts of the reporters calling his name reverberated inside his head hours after he and Robyn had been swept into the black SUV outside. The flash of cameras, the demand of microphones, the accusations pelted at him. How do you feel about the verdict, Cody? Do you regret your decisions? What is your family going to do now? All blended into an uncontrollable hurricane he couldn't stifle. When the SUV drove away from the courthouse, Cody's demeanor was lost. He sweated, his chest labored, his jaw so tense it seemed like it would snap. Robyn, still crying, offered her hand, but he pulled it away. His voice cracked the silence like a lash. "They don't get it," he growled, his eyes wildly scanning. "They've made this into a circus. My life, my family made into a sideshow." Robyn winced but remained silent. She had witnessed him being angry before. But this was not that. This was not the man trying to manage a household of 4 wives. This was a man disintegrating on live television. Hours afterward, Cody finally made his first public gesture since the verdict. Rather than withdraw, he went live. Shaky camera images dominated screens as Cody, seated in a dark room with Robyn beside him, ranted into his telephone. His voice was boisterous, passionate, bordering on fury and despair. "This verdict," he sneered, "isn't justice, it's an attack. An attack upon me, my family, my way of life. They want to destroy all I created because I would not live like them. Conform." He huddled in toward the camera, his untamed eyes searing through the television. "Do you believe this is about truth? No. This is about destroying me. Because I had the audacity to head a family in a different way. And now they laugh. The entire world is laughing." Robyn's eyes overflowed with tears as she continued, We're being persecuted. That's the truth. But if they thought they'd gain sympathy, they were mistaken. Within minutes, snippets of the livestream spread on the internet. Some ridiculed Kody for what they termed a meltdown on top of a meltdown. Others analyzed his every statement, saying that it vindicated the fact that he cared more about his reputation than the suffering of his wives or children. His bid for control had spectacularly backfired. Home in Flagstaff, the rest of the family sat silently as Kody's livestream flared on their feeds. Christine, fresh from her courthouse meltdown, shook her head. He's not even considering us. She breathed to Janelle, who was sitting beside her. Not the kids. Not what this does for us in the future. Always about him. Janelle's lips pressed into a thin line. She had been holding her emotions in all day. But now, seeing Kody's words plastered everywhere, something inside her snapped. I'm done, she muttered. I can't keep defending him, Christine. He's destroyed this family, and now he's blaming everyone but himself. Meri, sitting at a distance, scrolled through her phone, reading one comment after another attacking Kody. She had stood by him for years, irrationally so even when things were at their worst with him. But now, she felt something new. Relief that the world was at last getting to see the man she'd been living with for decades. The hours dragged on, and Kody descended further into chaos. In private, he paced like a caged animal, storming through the house. Robyn followed him, attempting to soothe him. But he bit at her as well. You think this is all about you? He bellowed. No, they're crucifying you now. They're accusing you of being a liar, a manipulator. Do you have any idea what that's like? Robyn's voice shook. I do, Kody, but yelling about it won't change anything. But Kody had not heard her. Anger had turned into something else, paranoia. He began ranting about conspiracies, about how producers had conspired against him, about how Christine and Janelle had gotten the kids to turn on him, about how the media wished him destroyed. They're all in on it, he spit out, looking around as if the enemy lurked in the shadows. Everybody wants me to fail. Robyn's tears came back. This wasn't anger, this was Kody cracking. Then came the coup de grace, the children. A few of Kody's older kids, angry and devastated, finally broke their silence online. One daughter wrote on Instagram, "We pleaded with him to listen to us, to notice us. He never did. Perhaps now the world will get it." Another son tweeted, "This isn't persecution. This is consequences." Screenshots of the children's posts went viral overnight. Fans who had always speculated about what life was like off the cameras now knew. And it wasn't pleasant. For Kody, this was the ultimate betrayal. Not the jury, not the media, not even his wives, but his own kids had abandoned him. The fallout was quick. Old friends stopped calling. TLC issued a statement that they were exploring the future of sister wives. Sponsors withdrew their sponsorships. Reporters who once begged for interviews now swooped like vultures, ready to record his failure instead of his family's success. Robyn held on tighter, telling him that they still had each other. But even she was aware. This was not the man she married. This was a man losing himself, piece by piece. Kody stopped leaving the house. He refused to answer calls. He stopped filming, stopped shaving, stopped trying. His public rants slowed, not because he found peace, but because he no longer had the strength. For the first time ever, Kody Brown was helpless. But as Kody backed down, the public doubled up. Talk shows argued over his every step. Experts debated whether his breakdown was a sign of things to come. Tabloids sensationalized with headlines, such as Kody Brown, from patriarch to pariah. And yet the internet ridiculed him. Memes of his livestream tirades overflowed timelines. TikTok spliced his words with overwrought soundtracks. His effort at control had only sealed his fate. One evening, weeks following the verdict, Kody re-emerged online for a final rant. His eyes were sunken, his voice rough, his cheeks sunken. "You think you know me," he growled. "You think you know this family. You don't know anything. You've made me the villain. But one day you'll see the truth." He cut the stream short, leaving millions of viewers in shock. It was the last public word from Kody Brown. At the end of it all, the man who had once ruled over a household of 4 wives and 18 children had lost it all: his control, his reputation, his legacy. The verdict hadn't shattered just his family, it had shattered him. And while Christine, Janelle, and even Meri quietly started rebuilding their lives, finally free at last from his specter, Cody was alone, holding on to Robyn, immured in a prison of his own creation. The internet turned to the next scandal, as it always does. But for Kody Brown, the breaking point was permanent. The man who had created an empire of love and loyalty was now merely a cautionary tale. A father without a family, a leader without followers, a husband without trust, and worst of all, perhaps a man without control. The aftermath: the storm had blown itself out, but its devastation ran through every aspect of the Brown family's lives. The verdict was done. Courthouse theatrics had disappeared from headlines. Viral memes started to fizzle, but in the silence that followed, shards of the family's broken world were strewn about, and it was evident that not everyone would recover from the consequences in the same manner. For Christine, the consequences were bittersweet. The ache of the courtroom was still throbbing in her chest, but something unexpected had flowered along with it: freedom. She no longer woke up with Cody's expectations suffocating her shoulders. She no longer walked around his mood swings, or muted her opinions to maintain harmony. For the first time in years, she could breathe. Christine gave her all to her kids. She cooked with them, laughed with them, and talked freely about the terror they had faced. Gradually they started healing together. Her Instagram turned into a rebirth diary: family dinners, hikes, and spontaneous smiles and photos. Fans flooded her comments with messages: "You look happier than ever. This is the Christine we always wanted to see." And they were right. Christine wasn't merely surviving the aftermath. She was flourishing in it. Janelle, too, found her own sort of peace. She had always been the practical one, the voice of reason in the turmoil. And now, she leaned into that role for herself. The judgment had taken away the remaining loyalty she had for Cody. In the days following, she concentrated on her own independence, her career, her friends, and her kids. For years, she had given up her needs for the benefit of the family. Now she finally placed herself first. In interviews, Janelle delivered her words carefully but firmly. "It's not about anger anymore," she said. "It's about moving forward. We can't stay stuck in the past." Her soothing voice was a balm to fans who were still recovering from the courtroom tumult. Where Christine found joy and freedom, Janelle found strength and stability. And both, in their own ways, found healing. Meri quote: "Seth's journey was different. For years, she had lingered in the shadow of a marriage that was little more than a formality. She had clung to hope, to the idea that Cody might someday see her again, not as an obligation, but as a partner. But the ruling, the streams, the constant rants, they snapped something within her. Afterward, she gave up on waiting for Cody to change. She chose herself." Meri slipped away quietly, investing all her time in her companies, and finding out who she was without him. She took pictures of solo vacations, of joking around with friends, of standing on her own 2 feet. The posts spoke for themselves. New chapter, new strength, no regrets. For Meri, the aftermath was more than survival. It was freedom. But while the other wives found peace, Robyn's world came crashing down. She had crafted herself on Cody, his girlfriend, his protector, his confidant against the rest. But now, with Christine, Janelle, and Meri all gone, she stood holding the fragments of a dream that no longer existed. Her courthouse tears were ridiculed throughout the internet. Her name was synonymous with manipulation on fan sites. And even as she held on to Cody, everyone could see that he was no longer the man she wed. His paranoia engulfed him, his temper isolated him. His once unshakable self-assurance was now a fragile facade. Robyn existed in solitude, her social media quiet, her public life sparse. She was the surviving wife. But far from victory, it was a sense of defeat. If anyone deserved the silence that followed, it was the kids. For years, they were the silent witnesses to their parents' decisions. They had posed for the cameras, withstood the brawls, and borne the responsibility of choices they never made. Now, in the wake, their voices spoke. Others voiced their opinion publicly, speaking their truths in interviews and social media posts. They discussed the hardships of living in a dysfunctional home, the confusion of divided loyalties, the anguish of seeing their mother cry behind closed doors. Their candor struck a chord among fans who had long questioned what life was like off-camera with TLC. Some opted for silence, stepping out of the limelight altogether. They concentrated on their own lives, creating futures that bore no resemblance to the show or their dad's decisions. For them, the aftermath was about ending the cycle, selecting peace instead of chaos, love instead of domination. And then there was Cody. The man who used to make waves with his loud voice and passionate outbursts was now a shadow of himself. In the weeks after his last livestream, he disappeared from view. No new vlogs, no public statements, no TLC sightings. Whispers circulated. Some reported he was hiding in his home with Robyn, not admitting anyone. Others suspected he was in talks with producers about a comeback story. But the reality was simpler and tragic. Kody Brown was shattered. The judgment hadn't merely taken away his power, it had broken the illusion he had created over decades. His wives had gone away. His children had turned their backs. His supporters had turned into critics. And his name became a joke. The patriarch who had once boasted of having an 18-member family now sat quietly, holding on to the sole individual remaining at his side. As the dust calmed, the world argued about what legacy Kody Brown would leave. Others thought that he was a cautionary tale, a man eaten up by ego, brought down by his own decisions. Others thought that he was a symbol of a failed experiment, evidence that polygamy could not persevere under the pressures of reality. But there were some who maintained that his tale was more complex, that beneath the mayhem, the rage and the dominance, there had been a man who truly did want to create something better, that his fall was not simply about pride, but about the overwhelming burden of attempting to master what could never be mastered: love, loyalty, and human hearts. Podcasts analyzed his saga, documentaries gossiped what went wrong, books were suggested, and behind it all, Cody himself was quiet, his silence louder than words. As time went on, the internet's blaze faded, new scandals filled the headlines, new reality celebrities took center stage. The world moved forward, as always. But for those of us who lived it, for Christine, Janelle, Meri, Robyn, the children, and Cody, the aftermath never really ended. The wounds stayed open, the lessons stuck with them. Christine established a life of happiness. Janelle remained steadfast in her independence. Meri found her freedom again. Robyn held on to what little remained. The children made new ways. And Kody Brown, he faded into the background, a ghost of a patriarch. His name remembered not for unity, but for downfall. In the end, the image that remained wasn't the courtroom meltdown, the internet memes, or even Cody's rants. It was Christine's smile at a family dinner, free at last. It was Janelle's calm strength, holding her children close. It was Meri's quiet laughter, standing on her own 2 feet. It was the voices of the children, long silenced, and Cody, a solitary quiet figure, a man with everything, and having lost it all. The aftermath wasn't merely the conclusion of a tale, it was the start of a new one, a story penned not by Cody, but by the wives and children who decided to emerge from the rubble.